Why is there a political party? Why are there divides? Well, it all starts when, anthropologically speaking, when there weren't so many people spread around the globe. In fact, very little, and when they were all coming out of Africa, and we lived in tribes. And when we were lived in tribes, everybody knew everybody else. As the anthropologist and zoologist Desmond Morris pointed out. And when everybody knows everybody else, everybody's pretty equal, and everybody gets along. And so, what happens though is that when you're in a tribal situation, or in any group, or and not only for humans, but for other mammals that travel in packs and groups, we can notice, as the first, I'm going to call him the first anthropologist in history, St. Augustine knows that one person will tend to dominate. One male will rise and dominate. And in the early tribal situations, that happened. One is a little bit stronger, one man's a little bit stronger, maybe a little bit more intelligent, maybe a little more influential in some ways, and he rises and becomes the leader of the group. And so all groups tend to have a leader, and not only for men, but for animals also. And once he gets a group, then once he becomes head of a group, then he naturally, because of uh, the first principle of life and economics, that all life does that which is good for it. And so, just like the deer or the reindeer are fighting it out to who gets the female herd, uh, a man in a tribal situation who rises to the top, he'll want a little more for himself than for the rest of the group. And for the rest of that group, he extracts a little bit of goodness for himself as being the leader, and naturally wanting more for himself, which is observant of the first principle of life, and the first principle of economics in general. So he rises to the top, and then that causes the first political party. He now represents the haves, and the rest of the tribe represents the have-nots. And so history evolves. More people come into the world, and more people travel throughout the world and settle throughout the world, up into Europe and into Asia, and as the groups expand and become more prolific, and get and grow in their what happens is that not everybody knows everybody else in society, and thus you have the first time you get man's inhumanity to man, because not everybody is known by throughout all of the tribe. It becomes a society where um, a king arises, and that halves, and thus you get a clear distinction between the have-not of societies and the haves of societies. And throughout history, that's the way it's always been: haves and have-nots. And the kings and queens, and they need help in performing their edicts into society. And what happens is that uh, they they hire an aristocracy. They hire their knights. They hire their enforcers. They hire their armies. They hire their sheriffs. They hire their everybody that can help them, and they are part of the aristocracy, and these are part of the haves, and they look down upon the have-nots, because they are and start to believe them themselves, and they become they look down upon the have-nots.